Hi guys, so my name is Joe Burrow and this is my project for HRE summer session, and I decided that I wanted to do this project on the need for federal marijuana reform. I think you can see a shift in the country's perception on this, and there's been a lot of countries to legalize it recreationally and medicinally, and there's a lot of benefits for it. So I think in order to understand the origins of marijuana, you have to start with the cannabis plant in colonial times. Cannabis is the root plant for marijuana, and there's a very low level of THC in this, so even if you did smoke cannabis, you wouldn't really get high, or the effects that people say that they are high. And hemp is a very useful product made from this plant, and you can use it to make cloth, paper, rope. They have very strong fibers. It was very useful in colonial times. It was even used as a currency in Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Maryland. That's how much you can tell that the colonial people thought of this plant. And in Virginia, actually passed a law requiring hemp to be grown on every single farm in the colony, and this was in 1619, which I thought it was very indicative of how useful this plant can be. And just to give you an idea of how strong the fibers are for hemp, they actually, the Spanish and British actually used hemp as sails because it was the only material that they knew of that could hold up to the high winds on the open water. And they used it in battle, on battleships and sail ships in the late 1500s. You can really see a shift in the perception of cannabis and marijuana, and really the origins of the name marijuana at the start of the Mexican Revolution in early 1900s, and a wave of Mexican immigrants came into the southwestern United States, and they were using it as a recreational drug. Cannabis in Spanish was referred to as marijuana, and the United States people who wanted to get rid of it really adopted this because they wanted to make sure that the American people understood that, or play into the American people's bigotry and racism and hatred of foreigners. People even spread rumors that the people coming in from Mexico were selling or giving marijuana to school children, which of course wasn't true, but you can just tell that was the ideas in the time. And that was written in Reefer Madness, which was an article in 1994. And the war on marijuana really started in 1930 when the government created a new Treasury Department division, Federal Bureau of Narcotics, and Harry Anslinger was the named director. And if you don't know anything about him, he was considered a racist during his time, and to be considered racist in the 1930s, you had to really be bigoted and extremely racist, which I think obviously was a mistake to name this guy director. just to give you an idea of how racist he was, here are some of his quotes. I'll go ahead and read them. There are 100,000 total marijuana smokers in the U.S. Most are Negroes, Hispanics, Filipinos, and entertainers. Their satanic music, jazz, and swing result from marijuana use. This marijuana causes white women to seek sexual relations with Negroes, entertainers, and any others. Another one is reefer makes darkies think they're as good as white men. And obviously these are appalling to read, and I did not enjoy reading them to you, but I think it's important to understand how the original ban is rooted in racism like this. And claims like this were made in hearings on marijuana law in the 1930s, and it really sparked the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937, which made the tax so high that nobody really even wanted to use it, so it effectively banned sale and all of its uses of the cannabis plant. It was actually ruled unconstitutional later and was replaced with the Controlled Substances Act in the 1970s, and this created a schedule of drugs 1, 2, and 3, with 1 being the highest, and drugs in Schedule 1 were supposed to be like the most harmful criminal drugs in the country and carried the highest jail sentence. And marijuana was actually put in Schedule 1 as a placeholder because they didn't really know where to put it. And they put it in there and never really revisited it and just kept it in Schedule 1. So the first legalization of medical marijuana was in the 1990s, and this is when everything really started to shift. California was the first state to do it, and then also in the 90s, Oregon, Washington, Alaska, and Maine legalized medical marijuana, and then in the 2000s there were even more, and then the 2010s there was even more. The first legalization of recreational marijuana was in Washington State and Vermont, and eventually Colorado, and now there are several states in the country that are legalizing recreational marijuana. And I think this graph really shows how the shift in perception was made. You can see in the 1970s, about 12% of the country thought marijuana should be legalized, and you can see a gradual incline until 2000, about 34% of Americans thought it should be legalized, and now 2017, 2018, about 64% of Americans think that marijuana should be legalized, and that's over half the country. And I think to really understand why it should be legalized, you need to understand how it helps people. Cannabinoids are the active chemicals in medical marijuana, and it can really help people reduce anxiety, reduce inflammation, relieve pain, control nausea and vomiting, which is really useful for cancer patients who are undergoing chemotherapy. It actually has shown to kill cancer cells and slow tumor growth, relax tight muscles, and stimulate appetite, which is really useful for people with eating disorders like anorexia, get back to a normal, healthy lifestyle, because it makes them actually want to eat. And really the reason I wanted to do this project on this was because of the amount of people that are incarcerated in the country, and the majority of those people being minorities. The United States has 25% of the world's incarcerated population and only 5% of the world's actual population, which in a large part is due to the original criminalization of marijuana. If we legalized marijuana on a federal level and provided amnesty for people who are in jail right now for marijuana, that would drastically lower our incarcerated population, which people don't want to do because incarcerating people is a business and makes money for the government, and there are even private prisons because prisons can be so profitable. But I don't think that's a good perception of our country, and it would create better lives for people who are sick, and people that are in jail right now would get out and have normal lives just because they wanted to smoke a little marijuana, and I think that's wrong. And here are my references.